because I'm a walker and talker, so like I would not be able to sit still
Oh, that's
for
fine, and
for an
it's
hour.
already blurred, so
Yeah,
it's okay.
yeah, because I got like a cover on my camera thing.
No worries. How are you, man? Sorry for taking a little bit. How
Good.
are you?
Yeah, no problem, no problem. How are you?
Oh, dude, I'm doing very good. Very good start of the morning. Very relaxed. It's been kind of like rainy and cloudy here from Mexico for like the past 2 weeks, so I've been really using this light for that reason, especially on the podcasts.
Yeah. Well, you're
Um,
looking forward to San Diego too, I imagine.
oh my God, I'm like smelling the air already. I
Are
can't wait to be
you
there.
what's the main goals? Are you going to be like meeting up with people and stuff like that, or is it just basically vacation, whatever?
So it's like a family summer vacation. I
Okay,
am like grabbing the opportunity that I'm going to California to record podcasts with people who live there, like Zayd K. Dahaj.
nice.
Um, I'm gonna be in LA for like a week, so I'm gonna go visit Case Bradford. Um, very excited to record more podcasts IRL and to meet people instead of just actually like just throwing memes on Twitter, you know?
Right.
Um, but yeah, dude, I'm super excited for this episode. I haven't recorded in I think like 2 weeks actually. So I'm very excited to finally get back in the game.
Nice.
Yeah, so um my first question is a little bit to get the can you hear me well by the way?
Oh yeah, I can hear you good.
Perfect. So for like the viewers who are tuning in, my viewers, your viewers, can you give a little bit on like who you are, what you do, what you're doing, and kind of like what got you here today, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I go by BowTiedThinker, part of the BowTied community on X. Um, just to briefly mention what that is, I'm sure we'll get into it deeper, but
Yeah.
it's basically just a community of like-minded people who are trying to basically build a decentralized community, decentralized economy. So it's big into crypto. That's kind of how it's got its founding in Bitcoin and stuff like that. But that's not primarily what it's morphed into over the years. It's now more like people who have various niches, various areas of expertise, whether professionally or otherwise.
Right.
And we have we have a free exchange of ideas. Obviously, there's lots of fun and shit posting and that sort of stuff. But effectively, everyone has kind of their niche specialty of what they're doing. If they're building a business, they're a product, or if they have an info product and they have their niche is knowledge in some area, whether that be fitness or some aspect of health. And yeah, so we basically are kind of all individually building that as kind of its own little economy. And so I had found my way into that several years ago, just through various people I was following on Twitter already, and they would share a tweet from Bowtied Bull or Bowtied Ox, those are some of the bigger Bowtied accounts. So that's kind of how I found my way into it.
Sure.
Also, Ajax, if your viewers are familiar with Ajax, I remember finding the Bowtied community through him too in the early days.
He's Bowtied?
He is not Bowtied, but he does share a lot of Bowtied content. He will retweet and engage with Bowtied accounts. So that's how I was kind of exposed to the Bowtied accounts in the beginning and found my way into it. Now, for me personally, as a background, now I have degrees in both philosophy and psychology. So I have a bachelor's degree in philosophy and a master's degree in psychology. But I spent my whole career, over 20 years, working professionally in software development. And but I was never fulfilled. I never felt personally fulfilled with it. I ended up going back to school just to basically have something that I was actually passionate about and actually enjoyed doing as a pursuit. So I ended up getting my degrees while I was working full-time doing software. And so I've never worked professionally. I mean, nobody works professionally in philosophy unless you're a college professor.
Sure.
But I've never worked professionally in psychology either. But I had both those backgrounds. So when I found my way into the BowTied community,
Oh, wow.
the first thing in my mind was, okay, well, what do I have to offer? You know, because everyone, you know, part of kind of the governing philosophy of what the BowTied community is if you're going to contribute, you might just, you can be a consumer too, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to contribute, the community doesn't care about credentials. They don't care about what degrees you have or what school you went to. They only care about, do you know your shit? Right. Or are you a grifter? So it is self-regulating in that regard too. That's actually, what's funny is, a lot of the haters think the BowTied community that we're all just a bunch of grifters, but it's actually the opposite. The governing system of the community is that grifters are sniffed out real quick and exposed. Right. Because the meme is that we're all autists and whatnot, and so anyone trying to peddle bullshit is going to get called out on their bullshit real quick. Mm-hmm. And it has happened. It's happened. People will come into the BowTied community trying to like for example, I don't know, try to position themselves as some sort of expert in marketing, and then it turns out that they're selling OnlyFans girls accounts, stuff like that. Yeah. So that shit gets found out. But if you come and you can bring the goods and you can actually bring value and contribute value, you'll be rewarded. You'll find friends and people will support you, and you'll find the information you need on how to take your expertise and monetize it. That's not grifting. That's just building a business. Yeah. You're providing value. Grifting by its nature would mean that there's not actual value there. It's a paper tiger or a house of cards or something. Yeah. So when I joined the community, I said, well, what value can I bring? I have this software background, but I never did anything with philosophy and psychology, which is what I was more interested in. So I said, well, why don't I do something with that? So I started getting into things I tried to combine those two. So I tried to get into using critical thinking to apply it personally to your life, and specifically your life as far as in the realm of ethics, of what are your values, what are the goals you're pursuing, are your goals derived from your values?
That's a big topic you talked about in our call the other day.
Yeah, because a lot of people, they have, if you ask them, they'd say, oh yeah, I have values and I have goals, but if you really prodded them on it, a lot of times their values and their goals were imposed on them, whether by culture or by their circle of friends in high school or their family or whatever, or social media these days. Yeah. Their values are not self-chosen. They never did that work. They never did the personal work to say, what do I actually believe? What do I believe about the universe? What do I believe? And it gets into these whole areas of what's called locus of control, which is just how do you view the universe? Are you in control of your life, or are you just a puppet and some entity in the universe is pulling your strings? Right. And that can greatly affect what values you end up adopting in your life, and then what goals you end up pursuing or not pursuing. I mean, let's be real. A lot of people just drift through life. They don't pursue goals at all. So that's kind of where I started focusing my attention on. And so I did writings, and I had a Substack, and I wrote and self-published a book on Amazon about all this stuff. And so I did that for about a year. So that's originally what I was doing. And like I said, that was mostly on X that I was doing all that. But then, because I self-published a book, I had other people in the jungle as well, like, hey, I've been writing something. I want to publish a book too. Can you help me publish a book too? So then I got into self-publishing. So my niche ended up, and let's be real, just to kind of to close the chapter on the whole critical thinking and goals and stuff. I mean, that's very saturated on X. If you've spent any time in this corner of X, lots of people are talking about those types of things. So it was very hard for me to kind of find my foothold in that.
Those types of things, you mean like critical thought?
Not so much critical thought, but things like mindfulness and motivation and goals and all that kind of stuff. That's that can get very saturated. So
super saturated because it's like easy to like sell and talk about.
Right, exactly. And there are so many books out there. I mean, the Jordan Petersons and Jordan Peterson's great and whatnot, but there's so many of those books out there already. Yeah. It's like, how am I going to make a name for myself?
Sure.
So I ended up actually finding utility and usefulness in self-publishing, because there were all these people coming to me who had ideas about publishing a book, and I had the knowledge to do it, and people didn't realize how easy it is to self-publish a book on Amazon. It's very, very easy.
Okay.
It's literally just a couple of button clicks. I've never had, to date, I have 100% success rate. I've never had someone come to me saying, hey, I want to publish a book on Amazon, and not been able to do it. Everyone's able to do it. And so then I started doing that. Yeah. I started using more of my background in software and design and graphic interface design. I started doing more graphic design. And this so happened to also coincide with when AI art, things like Midjourney started really getting big, and they were really getting good at producing good art.
Yeah.
So I was using AI generated art to do cover designs for people, to have really nice, captivating cover designs for their books, and self-publishing it. And that's actually what I've been doing until several months ago, until basically January of this year. Oh, wow. I ended up doing another pivot. Numerous people in the bowtied jungle started getting into more e-commerce and actually developing products and product brands, and actually selling products.
Yeah. And
I was interested in that too, and I ended up doing another pivot into of all things socks, which came about just simply because in this circle of holistic health, people on X that are a lot of them are bowtied adjacent, as we call it. They're not bowtied, but they're bowtied adjacent, meaning we're all kind of interacting with each other. Okay. Someone in particular that I was following one day was desperately looking to find a brand selling 100% cotton socks that was just all natural. So kind of part of the movement to just have all natural fibers in clothing. No polyester. None of that. No more of this toxic chemical crap. And there are options out there for things like 100% cotton shirts and shorts and stuff like that. But nobody out there had the socks covered. So I was like, well, that's interesting. I started looking into it, and sure enough, I could not find any.
Wow.
So I'm like, well, this is interesting. This could be a product. Here's an opportunity. So this was just me recognizing the market had a need. There was a potential business opportunity here.
Sure.
So I started I started researching it and trying to find, started contacting manufacturers, overseas manufacturers, whether they were in China or Europe. And 100%, every single manufacturer I contacted, they all told me the same thing. That's impossible. You can't do it. Well, tell me something's impossible and you can't do it. And I'm like, well, now you're going to make me do it.
Yeah.
So, so I started looking into it more, and especially, and in my mind, I'm like, well, this is stupid. I did a quick Google search, and I'm like, okay, well, synthetic fibers have only been used in socks since 1938 when spandex was invented. So people wore socks before 1938. There's a missing piece of the puzzle here.
Yeah.
So I was finally able to basically research and kind of find the methods and how to make socks in the traditional way.
Yeah.
That is 100% cotton. And so that's now actually literally just today launched my new product line that is 100% cotton socks that are all traditionally made, made with by hand with a hand crank machine. So on my Twitter account, I've been posting pictures of it and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of a long-winded bio of what brought me to today.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I appreciate the words. So there's a lot to unpack there, obviously, and I think like right now the socks that you're going to start to sell, you're making them yourself, right?
These that I just launched today, I am making them myself. For the past couple months, I had another style that I found one guy here in the U.S. that had been making them for me.
Right.
But and we can get into that if later on if you want. But yeah, I wanted to bring it in house. From the beginning, I wanted that control. I wanted to be able to have quality control, design control. Sure. I kind of wanted to have all that in house. There's just so much that comes with doing it yourself, and also just the craftsmanship of you're making something with my own hands. That's kind of something I always wanted to do too.
Yeah.
Is actually be a craftsman.
100%. And I rather buy anything that I'm gonna put on my body that's made by someone's hands and
exactly.
Than a fucking machine.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, that's the reason why I support the grounded athlete so much. Not only because he's cool as fuck, and his products are real, but because he makes them with
absolutely. And
so
he's been he's a huge inspiration to me. So every time he posts pictures and videos of him making his sandals and shoes, I'm like, oh gosh, that's just so awesome and so cool to be doing that. So I definitely took inspiration from him.
You're gonna have to hurry up and get you're gonna have to make videos with you smoking cigars.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Making the socks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get on this. Let's talk about the socks now. I have a lot of topics I want to talk to you about, but since we're on that topic already, I don't want to change it. So first of all, like Cot Edge. Why is that the name of the company? So
when I was first trying to come up with the name, and I'm a big proponent of ChatGPT and AI, and boy is it, if you know how to use it, it can be very powerful for brainstorming.
Yeah.
So I believe it or not, Cot Edge as a name came up by ChatGPT, was the one who came up with the name. And I was simply brainstorming with ChatGPT. Yeah. I wanted something that obviously reflected cotton. So that's obviously where the cot comes from. But I wanted something in my research. Mm-hmm. Anytime I did find something that was getting close to 100% cotton, they're very, I don't know how to put this. They're very feminine. Let's put it that way. It is not a market for men. Let's put it that's the most, like if you go on Etsy, you might be able to find one or two, accounts that have something coming close or whatnot. but again, it's very feminine. Etsy itself, in my mind, is a very female-based platform.
Okay.
I don't know a lot of guys that shop on Etsy. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just doesn't feel like it to me. It feels like more of an arts and crafts type thing, So I wanted a brand that was more masculine in nature, and I wanted more of a to try and get into more athletic aspect of it.
Okay.
Maybe not fully athletic, but that's kind of where the edge comes from. I wanted something a little more modern and masculine.
Okay.
And so that's where that came from. And so I went through, with ChatGPT, a lot of back and forth. I didn't just say, give me a name. There's it's a whole brainstorming process that kind of went into it, and it gave me a bunch of options. And not only that, it's also what is actually available as a domain name with a .com that's available that I could actually buy. So that's part of it too.
Yeah.
But then I think ChatGPT was clever in a way it didn't realize it was being clever. I don't think ChatGPT realized that the name Cot Edge pronounced sounds like cottage.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, that's good. Because now, because it's pronounced as cottage, it more invokes that, that holistic nature aspect of it too.
You can feel the socks.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. The coziness and the comfort, and the comfort and that aspect of it too. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I've recently experienced this this brainstorming with ChatGPT I'm working on a little project, and it's really good. If you know how to use it, it is really good. Yeah. Incredible. So besides you noticing on the timeline that there is no cotton socks and there's people who want cotton socks, have you witnessed the clothing issue yourself personally? But what I mean about like clothing issues, like this boom of synthetic clothing, this trendiness of the synthetic clothing, and nobody knowing it is terrible for our health. Have you experienced that yourself, and have you kind of gotten to a more natural clothing? If that makes sense? Does the question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do not actually have any sort of personal health background to where I was like, oh yeah, I had real bad eczema and then I changed to all cotton clothing and it went away. I don't personally have I didn't have any experience with that. So there wasn't a personal problem that I was trying to solve as much as I like I was saying before, I recognized there was a business opportunity first.
Beautiful.
Then I started looking into it and I started connecting with other people on Twitter in that space.
Yeah.
And so, like, for example, Ryan Griggs from Regenaissance, I've talked with him before too. And I started connecting with the other people who are kind of in this space. And then I started learning all of the background. And the other thing that's kind of came about just coincidentally at the exact same time as I was launching all this was all the microplastic stuff. This all happened at the exact same time that big study came out, saying all the men have microplastics in their balls. Yeah. It just was pure coincidence that all this happened at the exact same time. So it started opening my eyes to this isn't just a business opportunity. Even though I may personally not have experienced deleterious effects, at least not that I'm aware of, not that I'm directly aware of. Yeah. But I started learning about how bad the synthetic fibers are actually for us to be using. Yeah. And so, as with everything, not everyone in the population is going to experience those harmful effects. But no one can argue that it's not a harmful effect.
Mm-hmm.
No one's gonna argue that it's more harmful to be using natural fibers than synthetic fibers.
Sure. Yeah. Working with cotton to create socks and kind of investigating this clothing issue, what have you learned about nature, experimenting with natural fabrics?
That's a really interesting question, because until I got into having to learn about the process of actually making them, I didn't realize how much the physical properties of the materials, how much it matters in the actual construction. Wow. So you go back to when I first started it, and I was like, it's so funny thinking back how naive I was. I'm like, oh, sure, I'll just find some, I'll just search Alibaba. I'll find some sock manufacturer. Look, sure. you just do a quick search. I was like literally 2-minute search on Alibaba. I'm like, oh, look, here's a bunch of sock manufacturers in China. Mm-hmm. I'll just contact them, say, yeah, I want a sock that's 100% cotton. Great. Here's the money. Thanks. Here's my address. Yeah. I realized how naive that was, because, and I realized, and I can realize now why they all told me it's impossible. I mean, it's not impossible. It's impossible for them. Yeah. But it is impossible from the perspective of modern manufacturing equipment. You could not do it.
Interesting.
With all natural fibers, they do not have the stretch, like the tensile stretch. So like
that stretch is the one that sells.
Exactly. When you have the synthetic fibers, that's the polyester, mm-hmm. and they typically mix it. They typically will do it. They'll have a mix of elastine or something like that.
Sure.
And that mix is what constricts that fabric, so that when you wear it, it stretches out slightly when you put it on your body, so that it's fitting snug.
Yeah.
So and they would all say to me, they're like, if you had a sock completely made of cotton, it would be totally loose, and it wouldn't basically fit your foot or anything like that.
Yeah.
And they're basically right. The difference is, and what was different pre-1938 to post-1938, is it's how is it physically stitched? How is it mechanically stitched? Okay. That's the difference.
Okay.
The way, because 100% cotton the fiber itself does not stretch. Mm-hmm. The way you get the fabric to stretch is how you knit it.
Okay.
So if you knit the cotton in a way that it is stretched at the time of being knit.
Okay.
When you take it off the machine, mm-hmm. it'll then contract. Effectively, you're using gravity to stretch it. So once I start like filming, making videos and stuff, making it, people will be able to see it, and it'll make sense. Okay. When I make a sock on the machine, and I actually recently posted a picture of this last week. Yeah. When I make a sock on the machine, there's actually weights that are attached to the sock as it's being knit in the machine.
Really? Wow.
So the weights are stretching the sock down.
Wow.
So that you're knitting a tight stitch on it. And the stitch itself is what's being stretched by gravity, by the weights on it. So that when you take it off the machine and you take the weights off and the gravity is no longer stretching it, then the sock constricts all on its own.
Yeah.
Now you would never be able to do, if you think about this, this is why it's not done anymore. Think about this. How would you ever create an industrial machine that does this while the sock is it would be too complicated. There would be no justification for it. It wouldn't be worth it when you could just as easily use synthetic fibers that the fibers themselves stretch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that makes 100% sense. Yeah, that's incredible, and I love that you're doing that and you figured that one out. That's beautiful. That's a great way to like sell the brand.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because, like I said, I knew none of this before actually diving into it. And again, I think this is one of the great values of the Bowtied community, is
Yeah.
because this is what a lot of us do.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about this when we're starting out.
Right.
We just dive into the deep end
Mhm.
and just start doing it and learning it and autistically become obsessed with it and learning all
Yeah.
this stuff.
I love that so much. So what's next for Cot Edge? What do you, besides like starting to create these socks, what's on your mind?
Obviously, the one thing that's in my mind is right now it takes a lot of time. Right now, I've never done this before. I have no background in textiles, or I've never knit. I don't know how to knit. I've never done any of this. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But so right now it takes about 4 hours for me to make one pair of socks.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's very labor intensive. So as a result, it has a very high price point. So
Right.
the price reflects that it's not just that it's handmade and artisanal, as I call it, but just the fact that it's very labor intensive to do this, because
Yeah, that's
you
crazy. A pair
you
of
have to
socks
deal
in
with
4
the
hours.
weight. You have to constantly be adjusting the weights, and then you have to form the sock. You have to form the toe. You have to form the heel.
Yeah.
People,
That is
it's funny. People think like the length is what it is. Like I got asked the other day, does it take longer to make a crew length sock than it does an ankle length sock? And it actually doesn't. It's maybe a matter of a few minutes in difference in length. It's not the length that makes the difference. It's all the other stuff. It's forming the heel, forming the toe, forming the ribbing. That's the stuff it's not actually just, okay, here I go. Now I'm going to crank away and I'm going to crank off 7 inches worth of material. That goes quick. So what's in my mind for the long run is scalability, obviously, would be an issue. If I were to all of a sudden get 100 orders, I'd be like, well, crap, that's going to take me 3 months to fulfill that. Now, obviously, like I said, I'm just getting started. Obviously, as I go, I get better at it. I get faster at it. I get more efficient at it. So I don't doubt that I can get that 4 hours knocked down, a lot farther. But there's still, if it still ever came to it, there would still be a scalability issue. But, there's always the future would be something like, well, maybe I get to a point where I have to start having, contracting with other people, employees or something, to have them all doing this, maybe as like a cottage industry. Because what's interesting about what I'm doing is people may wonder, like, I'm not using a 100-year-old machine. The machine I'm using is brand new. There actually is a company that to this day is still making these machines based on a 100-year-old design.
Wow.
So it's still effectively the same machine that was very popular back in the 1920s in the Great Depression. It was actually a cottage industry. So women would get these machines and they would make socks in their home to sell to their neighbors and friends, and they would make a little money. They basically would. So women were able to make a little money by basically just making socks with these machines in their homes.
Wow.
And so
there's more history to tell there.
Exactly. So these machines, you can go to YouTube, and there's lots of women on YouTube who have these machines, and it's their little hobby. They make the socks, they sell them to friends and family, they sell them at farmers markets or whatever. But even there, when I would watch these videos, I'd be like, okay, all these socks these women are making are very feminine. They're rainbow colored. They're not something a man would wear. They're not. Nobody is doing 100% cotton. They're still using synthetic, because that's the other thing I had to learn. I had to learn how to use this machine. I've actually had to figure out and do special things to be using 100% cotton.
Wow.
All the women who are currently they're still using the synthetic, yarn that you would get from Walmart or the craft store or something like that. It's still synthetic because it stretches. There's there are extra steps you need to do when you don't have that stretch when you're making it. So, but long term, I could foresee, okay, well, maybe, these women all over the country who are already have these machines and are using them, maybe I start contacting them and say, hey, if you learn my way of doing it, and I provide you the 100% cotton yarn that I use, and you want to learn how I do it, I will pay you to make them for me, and then you all send them to me so that I have the inventory, and then I can. So that's probably long term. If someone ever asked me, how would you scale this business? That's how I would foresee scaling this business.
That makes sense.
It would be a cottage industry where I would have all these people making them for me, and then I would fulfill and market them, because that's the other thing. None of them know anything about marketing, and that's obviously going to be a huge part of actually making the business out of it.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for this project, man. I really am. I loved what you've posted so far. I'm excited that you're bringing this to the world and to the timeline, especially.
Yeah. And I have to admit, until I actually just a few weeks ago was finally able to get my finished product made, because I had been doing test projects up till now, but I never was working. I kept having failures getting it to work with the cotton, and then finally I had my breakthrough, and now I'm consistently making them for people and wearing them myself. That's the most important thing.
Of course.
I didn't even realize, because I'm inventing something that doesn't exist. It wasn't until a week or so ago that I finally had reached the successful product and started wearing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, these are amazing.
I love that.
So I'm excited for you to try the ones I'm sending your way, just to see what you think, because I'm really blown away by them.
Yeah, I'm obviously super excited to try them myself, because I use synthetic socks. I'm full cotton. I don't put anything on my balls. I tell everyone you're crazy for using polyester shorts, but I still use these synthetic socks. And your foot is one of the most absorbent places in your body. So that's a huge problem. And I'm so excited to work out with them. That's when I sweat, right? So
right, exactly. People don't think about how, it's kind of like your mattress or your pillow. Your socks, in a lot of cases, your socks are something you're wearing upwards of all day long. Some people, if you're someone who never goes barefoot, you're wearing socks 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
Two-thirds of your life. Why would you not be putting any thought into what you're wearing? Why would you just take whatever cheap socks Costco or Walmart or whatever is selling? Why would you wear that? Why would you have that on your body for 2/3 of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And people are into this issue, and still, they ask the question, why would I care of, putting synthetic stuff on my foot? They're worried about microplastics in their balls, and they ask the question, well, my balls are there and my foot's down there, and they forget that the body's a system, right? So
exactly.
It's all connected, and that's why you still have microplastics in your balls.
Right.
The microplastics too, but it's another point. The sweat glands are in your foot. You sweat so much over there because of the humidity you're creating with the sock and the shoe and the temperature and this and that.
And people are being lied to.
Absolutely.
This is one of the other things I learned that I didn't know in the beginning. The whole notion that synthetic fibers are quote unquote moisture wicking is bullshit. It's the opposite. Synthetic fibers do not wick moisture.
I mean, just smell your clothing.
They hold it, right? They hold it. You have to have a natural fiber in order to actually wick. And so, just like you're saying, with the whole with as much as people sweat, when they're working out or whatnot, that is the worst time to be wearing synthetic
Right. Exactly.
fibers.
Yeah. Incredible. I mean, the hoodie I'm using right now, it's 100% cotton. I use it basically every day to work out with. I wash it like once a week because it's
Yeah,
not. I
yeah,
100% feel it's not necessary. It doesn't smell.
right.
It does not
People
smell.
people
Yeah.
think about your denim jeans.
Yeah.
Denim jeans, for the most part, don't have
Yeah.
synthetic fibers in them. Denim, for the most part, is still made as just cotton.
Yeah.
I think it's cotton. Your denim jeans. How often do you wash your denim jeans? It's the same thing. You wash them maybe like once a week or every other. Even if you're wearing them every day, you maybe wash it once a week or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with all the rest of your clothing.
Yeah. I want to go back to psychology and
Yeah.
philosophy. What piqued your interest there in the first place? Like, why did you ever get your mastery there? Why did you ever study that?
So I've always been interested in philosophy, things like critical thinking, that stuff, even since I was a kid. That stuff always interested me for some reason. I didn't intend to get into, I've always been politically minded too. And politics does fall as a school of philosophy.
Yeah.
So I've always been interested. I never intended to get into philosophy or even psychology. It was more just, like I said, a passing interest. For most of my life, I thought psychology was bullshit because I think psychology, like most people, I think Freud's bullshit. Yeah. Therefore, psychology is bullshit. And truth is, most of psychology is bullshit.
Yeah.
But philosophy, I just happened to find when I, one day, just happened to be in the bookstore. I ended up, I was browsing the philosophy section at Barnes & Noble one day, and I saw a book called The Virtue of Selfishness. And I thought, well, that's an interesting title.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, I'm looking for something interesting to read. I'll get this book. And the book was by an author named Ayn Rand, who many people are probably familiar with. She, from the novels she wrote, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. Those are very famous novels of hers.
Right.
But she was a philosopher. She also wrote tons and tons of nonfiction that was just basically technical philosophy, of which The Virtue of Selfishness is one. That is her book. That's a collection of essays on the question of ethics. So I read that book, and it was so interesting that from there, that was the gateway. After that, I read everything else she had ever written, including her novels.
Wow.
And just became very interested instantly in philosophy, to the point where even before I was done reading all her books, that's when I went back to school for philosophy, is because I started reading her.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. Wow.
So I did that, and then, like I said, I ended up learning everything, interested in the technical aspect of this. So I'm very interested in the metaphysics and the epistemology, as well as the ethics and the politics and the economics of Ayn Rand, because it is a whole system. It covers every aspect.
That's incredible.
Of life. And so I got very deep into that. And, so far as I went to academic conferences that were just about objectivism, which is the name of her philosophy. Yeah. So I would go to objectivist conferences and attend courses and seminars on teaching various aspects of her philosophy. And, used that throughout while I was going to school, which is funny because in philosophy departments, she is very hated. She is not even considered a real philosopher.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, she is very much looked down on. Well, she made a lot of she made a lot of enemies. She's very
Okay.
staunchly anti-communist. So she was born
Okay.
in Russia. She lived through the communist revolution. She saw her family, her father's business destroyed and taken by the communists during the revolution.
Right.
Finally, she was able to flee to the U.S. But because of that, she's very anti-communist. Her philosophy is very capitalist, and she establishes the metaphysical and ethical basis for capitalism.
Right.
So one of the things about Ayn Rand is, like I was saying, it's a complete system. She doesn't just start with, oh, I experienced the communist revolution, therefore communism must be bad, capitalism must be good, right?
Yeah,
Therefore, let me find a way to prove that capitalism is good. That's the opposite.
Wow.
You know, she knew it was bad, but she didn't know why. She had to figure out why it's bad.
Of course.
And so her philosophy actually establishes the why it's bad, like unequivocally why it's bad. It's not just, based on feelings or anything like that. So I think that's why she's hated. I mean, because let's be honest, colleges, universities, no matter what field it is, but especially in philosophy, it's going to be very communist in nature, very Kantian. So in philosophy, one of the biggest philosophers of all time is Immanuel Kant.
Yeah.
Immanuel Kant, Ayn Rand viewed as the most evil man to have ever lived.
Wow.
Literally, the most evil man to have ever lived was Immanuel Kant.
What do you think about that?
I think she's right, but that's very hard. You can't say that in a philosophy class.
Yeah.
You will be. But the funny thing was, I was actually able to make quite a few inroads. So I guess I was fortunate that when I was in school, it was the 20-teens, so things hadn't gotten as bad as they are now. And I think also probably the school I went to was maybe a little bit better in the philosophy department, was maybe a little better. At my senior year, I was actually allowed to present an entire seminar on Ayn Rand's philosophy
Wow.
to a graduate level ethics course. So I stood up in front of graduate philosophy students and presented, one aspect. Obviously, you can't cover the whole thing. I had to cover one very narrow aspect of Ayn Rand philosophy. But just the fact that they let me, and because of that, the professor actually assigned a reading of Ayn Rand.
Wow.
I mean, not directly Ayn Rand. It was another philosopher who was a respected philosopher who was writing and publishing an article about Ayn Rand's philosophy. At least got that as an assigned reading in the course. Yeah, that all these hostile graduate students were assigned to read. Yeah, and you could say, oh, they were seething. What I remember one in particular. After I gave my presentation, it's followed by a Q&A. And one of the graduate students, he was like, oh, so what, I don't even remember what it was. Oh, so what do you think about a mother killing her baby because she didn't, because she was being because selfishness is good. And so a mother just kills her baby. And I looked at him with this strange look on my face. I'm like, well, that exact example was talked about in the assigned reading and why it's wrong. Yeah. And I'm like, and he just sat there quietly for a very anguished long pause. And I said, did you read the assigned reading? And he's like, no. And at which point everyone laughed at him, including his fellow graduate classmates. Yeah. So it was like, at that point I had won. If you wanted to look at it the perspective of a debate and winning, it was like at that point I actually had won. I had won over everyone. That maybe not, obviously not that Ayn Rand is correct or that she's the right philosophy, but the point was that she is worthy of consideration and she's worthy of discussion.
Right. How has her philosophy impacted your life personally?
I would say she's impacted my life personally in almost every conceivable way.
Wow.
So it's, going back to how I've always been into like critical thinking and logic and whatnot. But when you study Ayn Rand beyond the novels, but you actually get into the philosophy itself, it is a way of living. And she said this herself. Her philosophy is a philosophy for this world. It is a philosophy for living here on earth.
Wow.
It is not a philosophy for some other universe, some other afterlife. She is a very staunch atheist, and I have to admit, I was born and raised Catholic. I have never been able to offer a competing argument against hers for atheism. It's really interesting how the way her philosophy is in the realm of metaphysics and epistemology. I've yet to find a counter argument to it. Let's put it that way.
What is it?
That would be very difficult to lay out. And I would hate to do it just because I wouldn't do it justice. But it's a metaphysical question. If I were to try and at least make just a few points, the one I would make is, if someone wanted to argue for anything supernatural, whether it's the question of God or whether it's the question of DMT elves or anything supernatural, ghosts, whatever you want to say, the question itself is outside the realm of possibility for human investigation. It is not a question that you can even begin to explore. And I know that for a lot of people, that's going to be a very unsatisfactory answer. But that's, to basically briefly say
it makes sense.
It was the starting point. If someone actually is interested in it, though, the best source for it is it is a book called Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, and it's not written by her. It's written by her intellectual heir and student, Leonard Peikoff. So Peikoff is his name. So Leonard Peikoff wrote Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. That is generally considered to be the complete presentation of her philosophy in its totality in one work. So anyone who's interested in actually learning the philosophy of Ayn Rand, they really need to read that book. And Peikoff lays out in the very first few chapters this question. And when you read that book and you read those first few chapters, you really come away with that like, my gosh, it was almost like a light switch for me. I had believed in some form of God in some shape or form all throughout my life up until this point. When I read that book and I read those first few chapters, it literally was like a light switch going off. I was like, I don't believe this anymore. I cannot argue against this. I have no answer. I have no answer to this.
That's a big topic I'd love to touch with you on another episode once I read that book.
Yeah, absolutely. I would probably I would want to reread it myself.
Okay. Yeah. I love that because I do want to touch on a little bit on more for her philosophy, which
absolutely.
There's a point you mentioned in our call, which kind of connects to like the purpose of the podcast. And from the little bit of research I made on her, a quote that blew my mind that directly connects to the podcast, and it's one that you mentioned in our call, was, to say I love you, one must first learn how to say I.
Yes.
So how does Like,
Yeah, so I can tie that. So I can answer that by tying that back. And this is kind of like I was talking about before, kind of when I first got involved in the BowTied community, where I was talking about critical thinking and values and goals.
mm-hmm,
So for someone to say, I love you, you must first learn the I.
mm-hmm.
What that means is when you love someone, it is not imposed on you, right?
What
You
does that mean?
chose, as opposed to, let's counter this with like an arranged marriage. Okay, you didn't choose that person.
Okay.
You know, so if
Yeah,
you
okay, I get it,
if
yeah.
you love someone, why do you love someone? It's because you chose
To love them.
to.
Yeah, okay.
You don't walk by every stranger on the street
Mm-hmm.
and love every single person you pass equally. Now
Sure.
there may be some hippie who would blather that bullshit. Oh, I love everyone equally. I could tear that apart in about 2 minutes. You do not love everyone equally. If you love some, because that's not love. If you said, I love someone equally, just those words, just that sentence, you've completely annihilated the entire concept of the word love. Love has to have a standard. You have to have a measurement by which you are measuring your love. If you say, I love everyone, then it means that love has no meaning. If it applies to everyone, then it has no meaning. In other words, there's no this or that. So
Okay.
to say I love you, it means I've chosen this person. Now, why have you chosen? Now you have chosen that. Again, every word is important with Ayn Rand.
Mm-hmm.
You say, I love you. I chose that person. I chose to love that person. That was my choice. Why did I choose to love that person? This gets into values, okay? So if you properly love someone, and this is a whole other discussion, people may think they love them. It's not really love. It's infatuation, all sorts of things like that. But if you are properly loving someone, it means you have chosen that person for their values. It means that person's values, that person that you love possesses values that you
Okay.
yourself have chosen as values for you.
Yeah, that makes
In
sense.
other words, if someone had values that were completely opposite of yours and you said you loved that person, I'd be like, nope, that is not love. I mean, geez, just think about that. That's a recipe for disaster. And you don't even need to know philosophy for that. You can just look at your own life and your friends and everyone around you.
Yeah.
Just imagine that, and you can see it's ridiculous on its face.
Yeah.
So yeah, when she says you must first learn to say the I, that's what she's talking about. She's saying you must first know who you are and what your values are,
Makes sense.
and that you have then recognized and identified those values in another person. And only then can you then love that person.
Mm-hmm. I love that. There's another point of philosophy you mentioned in a call that ties into this podcast as well, which is rugged individualism. Did I say that right? Yeah.
Rugged individualism. Yeah.
Which is kind of like the I don't want to fuck up the words here, but like it studies how you are the most important thing in life.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you come to that, if that makes sense?
Well, I think first of all, I think it just makes sense if someone really thinks about it. People often have a disconnect on what they think and how they act. And this kind of even goes back to the whole religion and atheism thing. I sometimes see a common trope with this too.
I definitely think we have to make a part 2 happen. I mean, the things you've said so far, there's a lot of things I'd love to break down on another episode. But yeah, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a common trope that like people will be religious on Sundays, but then the other 6 days of the week,
Okay.
they live in
Yeah.
reality, right? So in other words, when you cross the street, you don't say a prayer and say, "Oh Lord, don't let a car hit me." You look both ways, don't you?
Wow.
When you cross the street, you are living and acting and thinking in this world.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, that's kind of where the rugged individualism and that you are the most important thing. It's a lot. The reason why Ayn Rand's philosophy is rational egoism, and the rational part is important. Rational egoism is because, yes, you have to think for yourself. You have to think for yourself in this world, in your life, in your situation.
Yeah.
All this has to do with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your situation is different from my situation.
Mhm.
Your knowledge, how much knowledge you've accumulated is different from how much knowledge I've accumulated. And so thinking for yourself means you have to take your whole context into consideration in order to act.
Sure.
I can't decide what I'm going to do or what career or what business I'm going to pursue because of what you're doing or what someone else or what someone on Twitter is doing. A lot of people do that, and
Yeah. Yeah.
we
About
all
to say.
see that.
Yeah.
That's a pitfall.
Yeah.
You need to avoid that. You need to be realistic with what your situation is.
That's the realest pitfall that exists today.
With social media,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like it's combining us all into one person.
Whoa.
And we're not. We need to be, and again, there's a metaphysical aspect of it. It's
Yeah.
like there's potential, just because I see someone else that is, a professional bodybuilder, that doesn't mean I can't work towards something like that,
Right.
but I have to be realistic with where I am right now and how to get there. I can't just immediately start acting like I'm 5 years down the road, in other words,
Right. Yeah. Wow. Wow. That was a really cool bomb in the middle of the episode.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. Okay, so for my last question, I feel like you're gonna enjoy this one. What brings you most joy in life?
Oh, well, joy, if I'm going to be consistent here, Rand describes joy as well, let's put it this way. Rand describes happiness as a state of non-contradictory joy.
Right.
Okay? So,
Non-contradictory joy?
yes. So happiness to Rand is a state of non-contradictory joy. Now, what that would mean is that you are not living your life with values that conflict. Everything has to integrate in Rand's philosophy. And I believe this. I actually try to live this way myself as best I can. But you can think about things in your own life like, let's say you have a toxic family member or a toxic friend.
Okay.
It would be contradictory to continue letting that person be in your life, really, when you think about it.
Sure. Yeah.
To be in a state of non-contradictory joy means if I'm going to be happy, it means my values have to all work together. I can't be holding two values that are going to be fighting each other.
Oh shit. Okay.
So that could be, when I say values, now that in it can be a whole discussion in and of itself. And I have to apologize. I take a lot of words for granted because I've been doing this for so many years. I have to remember that the listeners aren't going to really understand what I'm talking about. When I say values, you have things like the cardinal or Aristotelian values, like honesty.
Okay.
So like honesty and productiveness and logic and reason. Those are values, but then there are also concrete embodiments of those values, okay? Whether that be a person or a career or a material thing like your house or your car. Are those things all reflecting
Sure.
your
Okay.
values? So you
Okay.
have
Yeah, I get that.
you can so yeah. So to be happy and to have joy, you have to be in a state as much as possible
That doesn't
where
contradict.
you where you do not have those contradictions in your life. And that's hard. That is the one thing, that Rand said, doing philosophy is
I'm
hard.
still trying to understand.
That is why most people, 99.99% of people, go through life not having an explicit philosophy. Everybody lives their life with a philosophy, whether they realize it or not. The difference is, are you living your life based on an implicit philosophy, just kind of drifting based on what other people are saying?
Yeah.
Or are you living your life self-directed, taking action that is self-directed, based on your own thinking, having identified your own values that are non-contradictory, and integrating? Are you an integrated whole as a person with all of these things?
Okay. So is there something that, or is there a moment that does not contradict your values? Like, is there something that can bring you that joy? Does that make sense? Like, I'm trying to get the juice from you.
There's not going to be a magic pill. Let me put it that way. It is work. Yeah, it is work, and it's hard. So even if I talk about things from my own life, like even recently, like I had spent a couple of years living in a place, in a geographical place that I hated. I hated the climate, because I wanted to try. I lived away from my family for 20 years. Was never really close to them.
Okay.
I spent a couple of years trying to be
Close with them?
around my family and try to have a relationship with them.
Okay.
And I realized almost immediately that was a mistake.
Wow.
And so it was a bunch of things. Like I said, it was climate. It was the Northeast. I hate that climate. I hate the cold.
Yeah.
And not only that, I just realized I have nothing in common with my family members.
Sure.
They're just completely different values.
Yeah.
If that. So, traditional toxic boomer parents, the whole sort of thing. It's like, I couldn't even tell them, like, everything I'm doing, like with my socks and the bow tie. No, I never told them any of that. Wow. Like, if they came over to my house, I'd have to hide it. I literally would have to hide everything, because the meme in the bow tie community is you just smile and nod with people. You do not talk to
I love that.
Co-workers, family, normies. You do not talk to them about what you're building, because they will tear you down. It's the crab bucket. It is the crab bucket mentality that Jordan Peterson talks about. And so I realized immediately, I'm like, this was a huge mistake. And I was miserable. And right from the beginning, I had to put a plan of action. I'm like, I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm not going to be here long. And then sure enough, finally, a couple of months ago, I was, I finally got to where I needed to be. And I'm like, sold my house, packed up what I could into my car, moved back to Las Vegas, where I love being. And that's the climate I want to be in and the city I want to be in. And now it's like, boy, as soon as I crossed that border, as soon as I drove into Vegas and saw it, just my face lit up. I was like, this is my state of like literally and figuratively, this is my state of non-contradictory joy. It's
I was
like,
about to say
this is where I need to be. This
Like-
is where I feel happy. This is where I can work. This is where I can be heads down.
Right.
I can build. I can focus on building my business, building my company. No other distractions, no toxic people in my life, just me and my values and what I'm building for myself.
Sure. So, like, what would bring you most joy in life is protecting you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I will not let anyone into my life if they are going to. I learned this a very hard lesson. So this is something this is something we can close the podcast on. This is the magic that you're looking for. A very hard lesson I learned the past 5 years with a bunch of bad business choices and bad business partners that I got involved with. Don't ever let someone else usurp your values. Don't ever let someone come along and try to manipulate your values into their values. Don't ever let someone come into your life, whether it's a business partner or a family member or a friend, distract you from pursuing your goals and your values because with promises of the grass is always greener on the other side, or whatever meme or trope you want to, colloquialism you want to give to that. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. You've experienced, you know it.
Yeah.
Don't ever let someone else usurp your goals, take you off your path.
Wow. What a way to close the episode.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's like in hindsight, that's one of the reasons why I chose to drop out of school.
Yeah, exactly.
I was being forced to value.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great example. That's an example I've talked about, like in the book I wrote. That's exactly an example I gave.
What's the name of the book you wrote?
The name of the book is Clearly Thinking. It's on Amazon, which is funny because like at the exact same time, a really big author came out with a book called Thinking Clearly. So it's kind of funny that it's like the same title. But it's still there. It's under the pen name Thomas Wensky, which is not my name. It's just a pen name I pulled out of my ass.
Thomas what?
Thomas Wensky, Wenski. And yeah, so it's called Clearly Thinking. And so that has a collection of stuff. But then I'll also say, in addition to Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff, the other thing, if people are interested more in Ayn Rand, a great thing everyone can go to right now and just start reading up is called the Ayn Rand Lexicon. I think it's
the
Ayn Rand, so AYNRAND Lexicon, and I don't remember. I don't remember if it's a .com or a something else, but it's the Ayn Rand Lexicon. It's
a .com.
Yeah. So, and it's basically it's basically a glossary. So it's a glossary of Ayn Rand terms, and you can just read lots of experts. So if you wanted to go to the page for val, so if you go to the letter V, it's like a dictionary. You can go to the letter V and go to values, and you can
values, virtue,
yeah. So you can read a bunch of excerpts that Rand wrote. Or Leonard Peikoff wrote about these various things. So whether it be, so you said happily, like we were talking about non-contradictory joy. If you go to the lexicon and look up happiness, you're going to see the quote that I gave you, but you'll see a bunch of stuff written out. And so I'm sure even if you look at things like God, it'll have additional stuff like that. So that's a great resource if people are interested. That's a great resource to dive into because it tells you what book that excerpt is from. If you want to read more, read the full essay or something like that on that subject.
Yeah, this is going to be fun for the airplane tomorrow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, this is going to be really, really fun. I appreciate this link. And I just found your book. Perfect.
Great.
Dude, that was a hell of a podcast.
Yeah.
And
if anyone's interested in the Cottage, so Cot Edge is cottage.com, COTEDGE.com.
Yeah.
On X, I am just BowTiedThinker. So you can find me there. And yeah.
I'll link everything to you so people can find you.
Oh yeah, that's great. And I'll even do this. I'll do a we'll do a promo code for the podcast.
Oh wow, beautiful.
So yeah, we'll do a promo code for the podcast to get the socks.
That's beautiful. Yeah, so I'll let you know when this comes out so you can give the promo code.
Yeah.
But yeah, brother. Wow, we need to schedule a part 2.
Yes. Yeah.
That was really fun.
That would be fun. And if that, I mean, maybe we can even put together like some more concrete questions, like about the philosophy, like if we wanted to get into politics or ethics or specific questions, more about rational egoism and that sort of stuff. That'd be fun.
That would beautiful, bro. I appreciate you again today.
Yeah, absolutely. And, thank you.
I'm excited for the part 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give me a second.